Hi everyone, today we are doing a lifting thread treatment. We are working on snatching her jawline, so today we're just going to be focusing on lifting her jowl area and then a couple jawline threads going horizontal to help with this marionette, as well as just snatching right along her jawline. So prior to going ahead and starting any treatment, I always like to get a visual with the patient sitting completely straight up, just so I have a good idea of how gravity is affecting that area. So once I have them laid back comfortably for the treatment, I have a good visual to follow. So when they sit up, I have the same result. Typically for my pilot hole area, I like to use lidocaine with epi just to help vasoconstrict and help with that bleeding. It just helps keep the procedure a little bit more clean. I do try to avoid the hair as much as possible. Right here, my pilot hole was very close to her hairline, but we are just making sure that we're never resting our cannula close to her hair. Inside my syringe, I have 2% lidocaine that I will be using just a splash, a couple hash marks or so per vector, just for comfort. As you can see, this patient, she's very comfortable. If they're ever in any sort of pain, I always check my depth, and of course I can always give a little bit more lidocaine if needed. But like I said, we're just avoiding touching any of that hair in that area, and of course the patient was cleaned prior. We used HIPAA cleanse as well as going in and prepping with alcohol prior to as well. Now we're going in with our lifting thread. This is a Arte 1. And just following along my vector here all the way down as far as I can get it into that little bit of tissue. This patient doesn't have, a full jowl, just kind of the beginnings of that lax tissue. So we're just trying to prevent here, and we are going to be doing some cheek filler in a few weeks. So we are just doing one thread. You can already appreciate that lift. You can see how my markings for her jawline are now crooked because I was able to lift up that tissue. So it's always kind of nice to be able to see that as well. I cut as close as possible to that thread to make sure there's no visibility once it is healed over. And I did have to go back in and redraw my jawline just because we did get such a significant lift, which is a good thing. Again, just marking my jawline, I'm going right for that little beginning of a marionette line and then closer to that jaw as well. Just right along the mandible. Again, going in with my lidocaine with epi, just for my pilot. This is an 18 gauge introducer needle that we will be using here. And just following that same exact process, but now we're going horizontal. Good rule of thumb is I always stop before or after an area of animation. Again, just to prevent complication and any sort of thread visibility once that patient is completely healed. So just going ahead and doing my upper vector first, I always like to lift top to bottom. If I was doing more vectors in that initial point along her zygoma, I would also lift top to bottom. That's just my preferred way of doing things. I'm always kind of working against gravity. So just popping my cannula in here. This is a 75 millimeter cannula. And again, just like a hash mark or two of lidocaine, I don't do anything crazy. I don't want a ton of fluid in that vector. I just want my patient to be comfortable. And mostly I'm just using this cannula to pre-tunnel. Once you go in with your lifting thread, you cannot back up. So I just like to pre-tunnel and make sure I like my depth and the patient's comfortable, and things like that just makes the treatment a little bit easier. And finally, just going in with my threads. These are 17 gauge, 70 millimeter. And we are just going, again, top to bottom. This cannula is a little bit thicker than the 18, of course. So it is, more difficult when you're hitting up against those ligaments. But overall, a pretty easy treatment. And again, our patient is very comfortable, as you can see here. The 17 gauge threads, I do like to give a little bit of a twist at the end. They have a very large anchor, as you can see right there at the bottom. And I want that thread to engage right at the end, like right at the end of my line that you can see. So I just like to put some pressure, give it a couple twists just to make sure that that anchor is fully engaged prior to pulling back. So I kind of do the same thing here, pop into that place, and then I'll do just a few twists to make sure that anchor completely engages. And there's just a little twist and a pull. Again, just cutting as close as possible to ensure we don't have any visibility. Cleaning the patient up, I have my patient leave the Band-Aids on until the end of the day, and she is good to go. We'll see a side-by-side here in a moment, so we can kind of see, she is a little swollen, of course, but you can really appreciate her jawline. It just really lifted and snatched.